Have you ever looked at today's fashion, specifically jackets, and thought, why? Or just thought they had unflattering silhouettes? As you can tell, I am not a big fan of the oversized look. I find it unflattering and sloppy looking. I like my jackets to be warm, but still flattering and fashionable. For that reason, I have turned to more vintage styles. Today, I am remaking a jacket that I already made off camera, but in wool. This is a Rizzo jacket from Charm Patterns. It is modeled after the Pink Lady's jacket from the movie Grease, which ironically is one of my favorite movies. So let's talk fabric. I am using a gray wool jacketing that I had in my stash. It's just over 2 yards of fabric and the pattern calls for 2 yards. I will also be making the lining for the body out of a Japanese hand-woven silk, and the sleeves will be made out of a polyester lining. This is because the silk is very narrow and I would have had to piece the sleeves, and I already had to piece the back. So I just chose to do it in a different fabric. The only modification that I'm doing to this jacket is adding the welt pockets on the front. This jacket has a welt pocket, but it's small and it's on the inside. And I wanted some pockets on the outside. I already made a wearable mock-up in this twill that I experimented with the pocket placement on, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. So let's go make a cute, vintage-inspired wool jacket. So this is my pattern piece, my fabric. I've marked it. I marked it on here with chalk, as you can see here. This is fusible interfacing here that I cut out in the size that I needed. And then these pieces are my welt pieces that are gonna go on the outside. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fuse all of my interfacing to these pieces, and then we'll start sewing it. So here I'm just marking out with a pencil so that it does not get erased with the heat of the iron where I'm going to actually be making those stitches, which is going to be the next step after I fuse this interfacing. So after I fused the interfacing on, I stitched around here where I had marked. And then I also made the welts by just stitching the ends together and folding it out so that this fits mostly perfectly right there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. So here you can see I am stitching around that rectangle that I marked out on there and following a tutorial that was done by Sew Anastasia, and I will link that in the description below. She talks about how big to make them. She gives you very detailed instructions on how to make a welt pocket specifically, and so that's the tutorial that I'm following because before I did the last jacket that I did, the version of the jacket that was just made out of like a denim, I never done it before, so I used her tutorial in order to guide me because this is something that I'm still learning how to do and I've never done before. So I felt like her tutorials are really easy to follow and she gives you really step-by-step instructions. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're unsure about what I'm doing here, because I am by no means a professional. So the next thing that I'm doing is I'm cutting down the center here and then to these corners here to make these little triangles. So to figure out pocket placement for where I wanted this welt pocket to go, I just used another jacket and I measured in where that jacket had the welt placement, and then I determined where I wanted to put it on this jacket using that as a reference. So now I'm just gonna press these open, all of them. And I already did it on this one, as you can see here. I pressed all these seam allowances down on here. So I'm just gonna do the same thing here. Since this is a wool that I'm working with, I also have a clapper, which is basically just a piece of wood. And I think how it works is it presses the wool down, and it also holds in the steam and heat until it cools off, and then it helps it to hold the press. But I am not 100% sure that is exactly how it works. I just know that it works. So I definitely recommend using one of these if you are working with wool, because it really helps, because wool doesn't hold a press super easily with just the iron. So I think this makes a big difference when you're trying to press wool. So there you have it. I have 2 pressed pocket openings. So now I'm just sewing the welt into place against that seam allowance that I made before. And this is what that's gonna look like. So here I'm sewing the pocket bag, and I'm doing the same thing, sewing that into the seam allowance that's there from the welt. And you just have to get as close as you possibly can to that seam allowance. It's really hard to see on my video, but like I said, you can go and watch Sew Anastasia's video, and she has really good angles, and you can really tell exactly what she's doing on hers. Once you sew that into place, then you sew down the side seams and that corner piece, which I believe I do a little bit later, but here you can see I'm just sewing that pocket bag into place as close as I can get it to that seam allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down this corner and then all the way down the pocket bag. And I'm using my zipper foot for some of this because it's very bulky, and I want to make sure that you have to try to get as close as you possibly can and stitch this corner down so that the outside looks really good. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. So the only other thing that I'm going to do now is I'm going to just pink these, just because even though this is all going to be on the inside, I just want to make sure it's not going to fray. Okay, so now it's time for me to start assembling the jacket. So now I'm just going to stay stitch the neckline on this jacket here. So just stay stitching here with a 1/2 inch. So after assembling the welt and the pocket bag and closing all of that up, I forgot to mention, and I forgot to record, that you go back in and you top stitch the sides down as close as possible to that welt pocket so that it will stay closed. And like I said, you can reference her video. It is really good, and she goes through all the steps on how to make it and what size to use and all of that kind of stuff. So here's my stay stitching right there, and I did it on both sides. And then the next thing is to sew the darts, and the darts, I've already pinned the darts, and I have them marked here. I don't know if you can see them because the chalk is kind of rubbing off. But I pin the darts here, and then I'm gonna sew right along this mark here that I have, stopping here at the point, but not back stitching. So I could back stitch down here, but don't back stitch up here, and then you remove it and tie off the pieces. And that one is done. So here I'm just doing the same thing on the other side, and again, once I am done sewing that dart, I go ahead and tie off the end of the dart, and then I go ahead and press both of these darts towards the center front. And you can see here I'm using my clapper to help hold that pressed seam in place and to help it stay where I want it. Here's my yoke, and here is my jacket back. I'm gonna go sew these together. Now I'm just gonna press it. And it calls for you to press the seam allowance down. So when I cut the back piece, I had to cut it into two pieces. I had to piece it because the silk that I'm using for the back and the front of the lining is hand woven from Japan, and it is only about 30 something maybe inches. It's very narrow, so I'm piecing. So here I am sewing the darts on the lining, and my boyfriend and my son had just came home from the gym, and my boyfriend was talking to me about something really stupid. He said something about common life, and this was my response to him.
And you know, that's...
How about uncommon life? So here I'm stay stitching the lining, the neckline of the lining on the back, and then after I do that, I am stay stitching the facing and the lining piece that attaches to that facing. These are a princess seam, and so stay stitching them helps you to be able to spread out the curve, and you can clip into it. So you stay stitch and then you clip into those, and then you're better able to match those seams and stitch them when you spread them out. This is something that I learned specifically from her videos, and I had never known about before, and it makes it so much easier to sew those princess seams and to match them better so that you don't have to worry about pulling on the fabric or having it be uneven and having puckering. It makes it match up much easier. I'm clipping into the seam allowance here and then pinning those pieces together so that I can better match them up. So it spreads out those clips and then it spreads the fabric out as well, but the stay stitching helps to keep the fabric from like ripping apart. This makes this process of matching up your princess seams so much easier. I wish I had known about it before, because the struggle is real when you're trying to sew a princess seam. here I am doing the same thing on the other side. Here I'm sewing together the front and back at the shoulder seams on the lining, and then I believe I do the same thing on the side seams for the lining, and then I go back and do the same thing on the outer pieces of the jacket. And the reason why I'm doing it like this is because of the fact that I have to change thread. This is white thread, and then obviously I'm using gray thread for the gray fabric, and it's just easier to batch sew them all with the white thread and then go back to the gray thread, because that's usually the main thread that I'm using, because this is just for the lining. So I've done the side seams on this is the lining. So I did the side seams. The lining is basically all put together. I stay stitched the armholes. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side, and then I'm going to do all of the same things that I did to the jacket outer layers, because I have to change the thread between. So I'm doing as much as I can with the white thread, and then I'm going to switch back to the gray thread so I don't have to keep switching back and forth. Yeah, because that would be a pain in the butt. So I'm going to do that off camera, and I'll be back to finish the rest of the jacket. So here I'm showing you guys that I did the side seams and the shoulder seams on the outer layer of the jacket, but I believe my son was running the vacuum in the background, so I cut the sound out of this. So here I am sewing together the waistbands, the two waistband pieces. So one of them is interfaced and the other one is not interfaced. And I think there was also some music playing in the background, so I was just being kind of silly. And then the next step after this is to understitch. And I also do want to tell you guys that although I don't always show it, I am definitely pressing after each seam that I make. Or if I am not doing it right afterwards, I'm like batch sewing, so I will sew several seams and then press several seams. But I think that it is so important to mention that because pressing is such a large part of sewing, and a lot of people don't realize that. But I don't have a second camera, so it's hard for me to always show the pressing. And here you can see that I am over at the ironing board pressing, and here is Wolverine, our cutest little kitty, our smallest kitty too. And he just has come over to say hi and lay down and hang out with us for a few minutes. He's always looking for attention. He's such a cutie. Here I'm stitching the waistband onto the jacket without the lining. So I don't believe the waistband has a lining piece. It has a facing piece on the inside that you then fold over to hide all of the raw edges, which you will see in a little bit. But here I'm just stitching both the facing and the interfaced piece of the waistband onto the jacket front. So here I am basting the zipper in place on both sides. On this particular pattern, how you attach the zipper is you baste it in place, and that's just to make sure that your teeth are aligned and that your zipper is aligned and it looks good. And then in order to actually secure it in place, you top stitch it on the other side. And I don't know if I recorded that. However, this is very difficult to do in all actuality because this fabric is relatively thick and my machine struggled to go through some of the layers. Like if there was like 3 or 4 layers there, it was a little bit more difficult for my machine to go through it. Though in the end, I did end up being able to do it. It was just kind of a pain in the butt. And also you can see here that I'm struggling with the fact that I have to shove all of this jacket underneath here. I guess if it was a bigger jacket, it would be more of a problem, but luckily this isn't a huge jacket. Munchie, what the actual
What happened?
She jumped on something. I don't know what it was. Oh. Clips went everywhere because she jumped on the clip bag and the clips went everywhere. Well, it was a good thing I didn't overreact, huh? Anyway, that was my cat Munchie jumping on a bag of clips and making them fly everywhere. It sounded like something broke, and that's why I screamed and jumped because I didn't know what the hell it was. But yeah. At least I didn't overreact. So here I'm doing the top stitching on the outside of the jacket that's actually meant to hold this zipper in place, and I do that on both sides. And actually I was intending to use a different color, like a darker color thread for top stitching, and I think I ended up picking the wrong one, but it still looks fine. And then I do the same thing on the other side. Here I'm assembling the collar by sewing together the interfaced piece and the uninterfaced piece, and then I also understitch. So here I'm attaching the collar to the jacket, the outside of the jacket, and then I also attach the lining over this, so it will cover over this once I attach that lining to it. And I don't believe I recorded that part of it. I missed a little bit when I was recording stuff, but I will talk you through how I did it once I get to that point. So here I'm assembling both sleeves and also the sleeve linings, and I do this the same way, just right sides together down the underarm seam. So here I am sewing the placket, and this is a little bit fiddly, and honestly I feel like it would have been better if it was assembled or sewn before you sew the sleeves together. And I think if I ever make this jacket again, that's how I will do it, because this is actually really hard to see exactly what you're doing because it's closed and it's just really hard. So like I said, I would do this before I assemble the sleeves together, and then close up the underarm seam, but that's just personal preference. Once that is done, I am basting together the layers of the sleeve at the top and at the bottom so that they are just all one piece, and you're just making sure that you're matching all of your seams and making sure that everything is even. And that way, when you go to attach the sleeve to the coat body, it is easier. And also when you go to attach the cuffs. So here I am assembling the sleeve cuff, and then after I do that, I put those onto the sleeves and attach the sleeves. After that, there is some hand finishing and some stitching in the ditch in order to close off the waistband, but all of that I forgot to record. Either my video card filled up or my battery died and I didn't realize that I was not recording it. So after this, it will be on to the reveal. So here is the finished product, and this hat is a hat that I got when we went to the Texas Ren Fair, and I'm really happy with the results of this project. I think it looks really nice, it's a very warm coat, and it fits me really well. The day that I filmed this was the day after we got a bunch of ice, and this was kind of the best that I could do as far as the exposure was concerned. It looks really washed out, but it was super bright outside this day because of all of the ice that was on the ground, and really cold, especially for Texas. Okay guys, so I'm just gonna quickly talk about my final thoughts on this jacket and about how long it took me. It took me a couple of days to make it. I don't specifically remember how many. I was trying to get it done before the snowstorm, and I think I started it that weekend before, and that happened on a Saturday into Sunday. So I filmed the reveal that Sunday in the morning after we got all of that frozen rain. It was originally supposed to snow, but it was just freezing rain. And so it took me about a week, but I wasn't working on it full time for a week because I have a job that I work. So in my off time and in my days off, I was working on it. So yeah, not terrible. And my final thoughts are, I really like this jacket. Although it is not intended to be like a coat that you wear out, because in the movie, it was just a little jacket that they wore, but I kind of turned it into something else, and I really like it. I'm really happy with how it came out, and I'm excited to wear it this winter for when it's cold. It doesn't often get cold here, and this is not a super warm jacket, so I think it's really appropriate for the Texas weather. I'm really happy with it. I like it, and I am excited to get some wear out of it. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a like.